called it, and that was enough.
Wow.
Yeah, while you're eating. Sorry for making you that. So we've run into this more than once, but whenever you're presenting to the hall, they're not going to have a basis in sustainability sometimes, so that's why it's a nice way to just define it for them before we dive into the particular subject we're going to. Because we've gone over this at least twice now, I'll move on. So may I have somebody define or read one of the definitions? The first one, actually.
Food loss refers to decrease in quantity or quality of food. Food loss in the production and distribution segments of the food supply chain is mainly caused by the functioning of the food production and supply system or substitutional framework.
So even though we do everything in our ability to reduce the amount of waste created with our food, a lot of it usually is due to the production line. So they want to put the best produce out on the shelf, right? So they throw out all the nasty looking stuff and don't show us the things that are still edible sometimes to ensure that we'll buy it. That is actually what it was. May I have somebody read the second thing?
An important part of food loss is called food waste, which refers to the removal of food from the food supply chain which is fit for consumption, or which has spoiled or expired, mainly caused by economic behavior, poor stock management, or neglect.
So if you see a squishy apple, most people will think, oh man, it's bad, and just throw the entire apple away. But you can still eat the other part of the apple. Just cut off the part that's bad. Or like a banana. You see one part of a squishy banana, and some people will be like, get that out of here. But you can still eat the rest of the banana. So we're just going to try our best to learn about it.
Freeze the banana and make banana bread.
Banana bread is amazing. Good idea. So we're going to go into exactly what the food supply chain is and what we can do to reduce the amount of waste in that process. So we have 5 main components of the food supply chain, defined as production, handling and storage, processing and packaging, distribution and market, and consumption. So during the production or harvesting in the form of grain left behind by poor harvesting equipment, discarded fish, and fruit not harvested or discarded, it happens because they fail to meet quality standards or are uneconomical to harvest. So there's really not much we can personally do here other than say, I'm okay with ugly fruit, and still eat it, you know? And then as far as handling, it happens whenever the food is degraded by pests or fungus and disease. So that's why we have those herbicides in them, in produce sometimes, is to reduce the amount of waste that happens during that process, just handling the food. And then we also have processing and packaging in the form of issues that can happen here is spilled milk or damaged fish, fruit that's unsuitable for processing, ugly, And then there's also processed foods that may be lost or wasted because of poor ordered forecasting and inefficient factory processes. No good. And then there's also the things that happen during the distribution and market arena is again, edible food that's discarded because it's not compliant with aesthetic quality standards or is not sold before the best before and use by dates, but we're going to see that that's really not because of the expiration of the food, because it's not regulated, what that date is. It's whenever the person that's selling it thinks that the food is going to taste best. So you can still eat it after that sometimes. It's hard for us to tell, but then there's also, during consumption, like waste can happen in the form of food like not being eaten, just buying too much and throwing out everything that's left over because you didn't like think about what you're gonna buy before you went to the grocery store. Happens to the best of us, but we can do better, you know. So, thank you. Okay. What we have right now in terms of the waste happening, like, it's kind of a big deal because there's a lot, especially by us as Americans. On a weight basis, 32% of the food is wasted, like, globally. Crazy. That's about a third of all food that's created just going in the trash. But on a caloric basis, that's nearly a quarter. Not acceptable. From these like global statistics, 56% of it happens in developed parts of the world, places that we live, including Oceania, Europe, and the industrial Asia. Sorry. And then from that, 14% of it comes from us in North America and Oceania, which is, I mean, awful. Why do we do that? And then 30% per capita, which is per person. Most wasted is produced in the retail sector of the chart you saw before and the consumption bit. But for everybody else, it's only 44%. Still not okay. And 8% per capita wastage. So on their end of the world, most of the waste that's happening is in the production and handling of it, because a lot of the time you'll see like, this star fruit is from China, you know, like, so in the process of it getting here, it didn't make it, you know, it got bumped a couple of times too much. That is something that they can't really like control, but we can definitely control the retail and consumption part on our end. And this is just a way to visually see the loss, like by the types of food. So cereals is the majority of the like waste by caloric intake, whereas it's only 19% of the weight. So this is important because there's a lot of people that go hungry, you know, and even though it's only 19% of the weight, it still matters because it can provide a lot of nutrients in the long run, whenever you consume them like a cereal or a fruit or a vegetable. So it's just a way to see that. Then there's also the misappropriation of available funds, in that whenever you go out and buy food, a lot of it just goes to waste. Like by the end of the week, you're going to go to the grocery store again, and your parents are going to be like, look in the fridge, and they need more space. So what they end up doing is just throwing away the food that could still be eaten, but it's just taking up too much space, and they're going to the grocery store again. And that could even be you. But the amount of money, like not only is this a problem like environmentally, you're wasting, or the average family unit is wasting $1,000, $1,600 per year on just throwing away their food. Which is just, you know, bad planning. And this affects us in the world by emitting like 3,300 to 5,600 metric tons of emissions in greenhouse emissions. And then the amount of water consumption in that waste is estimated to be like 173 billion cubic meters per year, which is about 20% of all water used in agriculture. Additionally, like on the side, in sub-Saharan Africa, where many farmers earn less than $2 a day, post-harvest losses have a value of up to $4 billion per year. So they're basically just going negative, feeding us. Again, unacceptable, you know. But based on data from 2010, that's the most recent we could find, the US alone is estimated to waste 30 to 40% of its own food supply. And that amounts to about 133 billion pounds and 160-ish billion dollars worth of food. So that adds up real quick, and it's not okay. 31% of this is at the retail and consumer level, and it's just the beginning of like estimating that, you know. So it could definitely be affecting us more than we understand. That's 2010. So whenever it says NA and O, I think pretty sure that's North America and Oceania. In these areas, the total food produced, of that food produced, 42% of it is wasted. And this is a way to like visualize the consumption that we have versus like the amount that we're producing. So on the furthest left to you, that's North America, and as we go down, it's the industrialized areas, so North America and Oceania, industrialized Asia, Europe, North Africa and West and Central Asia, Latin America, South and Southeast Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. And you can see the trend in production increases as you get closer to the like less developed areas of the world, and the consumption drastically decreases. Whereas for us, we're consuming 61% of everything that's produced. So all of the work that they put in, we put to waste whenever we throw away our food. So a way that this happens in the home is whenever food spoils, like I was saying before. So you go to the grocery store, you don't really have a list, or maybe you do, but you just keep looking anyway. And you buy food that you really didn't need, but it looked really good at the time. And this is understandable whenever you don't like look at the bigger picture, but it has a lasting impact even though it meant nothing, like nearly nothing to you. Another way that food spoils is just not storing it properly, like putting spinach, like leaving spinach in the container. It's going to spoil a whole lot faster if you put it in like a bigger container, because the water that accumulates at the top increases the chance of it just going bad. It took me a while to figure that one out, so that's why I shared it. And then there's also just forgetting that food exists in your fridge, like if you have a big fridge. I know that's hard to do in a dorm. There's not very much space in there to begin with. But whenever you're in a home, that happens sometimes. It's just like at the very back, and you're like, oh man, I had relish. And then there's also like getting too large of a portion. Like if you're out at a buffet or at the dining hall, and you're like, man, I could eat all this food because I paid $14 for it. You can still ask for a half portion, like on campus, whenever you go to the dining hall, and that's perfectly fine. They're not going to judge you for it. If you know you can't eat that much, don't get that much, because then it's being wasted. But if you were going to like take that and take the rest as leftovers, make sure you eat it, because if you don't, it goes in the trash. And there's also, you know, kitchen mishaps, like if you spilled all the flour onto the floor, you're not going to eat the flour again. It was on the floor. And then food scraps, like whenever you finish eating an apple, can easily be made into a compost bin or a compost pile. But we don't do that. And then throwing away food excessively because of the assumed expiration date, again, that's not regulated. But then there's also excess food whenever you go out to a restaurant. Bring a Tupperware. Like, you might get a funny look if you're going out to a restaurant and doing that, but it's a lot better than just leaving the food on the table and then, like, just because you're not the one throwing away, you know it's going to get thrown away. So, get what you can, take everything else, and actually eat the food. Takeaways. Here we have a video on what expiration dates actually mean.
What the? Eggs sell by yesterday? Orange juice best by 2 days ago? Yogurt used by last week? Well, now I have to get rid of all this food. If I don't, someone could get sick.
No, you don't. Best by, use by, sell by. Contrary to popular belief, none of these dates actually tells you when food stops being safe to eat. In fact, food can still be good way past the date on the label. According to food safety experts, eggs can be eaten 3 to 5 weeks past the sell-by date.
Sell-by dates are a yoke.
And the USDA says canned and dried foods can be safe indefinitely.
Oh, I won't go bad for years.
And if food isn't handled properly, it can actually go bad before the date on the label. Even something as simple as leaving it out on the counter too long or setting your fridge at the wrong temperature can cut shelf life short.
It's so hot in here. I think I'm hungover, mate. Oh, yay.
At the end of the day, these dates just don't tell you that much. Instead, you need to check your food for signs of spoilage, like changes in smell, color, or texture.
Woof, woof. Okay, well then this milk is definitely bad.
No, you can still drink me.
Oh yeah, milk is a really neat exception. Even after it spoils, it's still totally safe to drink.
Oh, ew, stop it, you're gonna get sick.
Nope, milk is pasteurized, which means any harmful bacteria was removed long before it hit the shelves. Even though it might not taste great, the safety risks of drinking spoiled milk are virtually zero.
Adam, stop. I get it. But if the date doesn't say when the food's safe to eat, why does the federal government put it there?
Hate to break it to you, they don't. We all assume that these labels are some kind of big government safety regulation. But with the exception of baby food, the federal government actually doesn't require date labeling of any kind.
The citizens of this great nation have the inalienable right to eat 5-year-old mayonnaise if they want. For this is America.
It's all left up to the states, and every state has their own rules. In fact, 9 states have no date labeling regulations at all.
Well, who does put the dates on the food? Seems like they don't tell us anything at all.
Oh no, they do tell you one thing, when the manufacturer thinks their food tastes the best.
What?
Here at Hulco, we use cutting-edge food science to determine the exact best by and use by date at which our food is the most snack-tabulous. Still pretty good. Pretty good garbage, you mean? Dig it, boys.
But that food's not dangerous, and he just said it still tasted good.
Not good enough. We need our customers eating our food at maximum crunchitude, or they might buy something else. And hey, if they think they have to throw it away sooner and buy more.
But that's wasting food.
That's right, Melinda, and it's a major problem.
Melinda, this is Dana Gunders. She's a senior scientist at the Natural Resources Defense Council and a co-author of a major 2013 Harvard report detailing the massive problem with these dates.
Americans trash over 160 billion pounds of perfectly good food every year. Roughly 40% of our food supply is thrown out. And these confusing dates are a huge factor.
One survey found that 83% of Americans have prematurely thrown out food based on the sell-by date. But that date isn't even meant for consumers. It just tells stores when to turn over their inventory.
Wait, sell by today? But I bought this today. Oh well,
This is ridiculous. Someone should do something.
Well, some leaders in the grocery industry are pushing for clearer, simpler labels, but until there's a nationally mandated system, their recommendations are just voluntary.
And the worst part is, we're trashing all this perfectly good food while millions are going hungry.
Whoa, that one's alive. All this has gotta go.
No, it's still good.
Hey, Adam here. If you like the...
So that's not crunchy. That's what that date actually means. But don't feel helpless. I know that it can all get really confusing and you can feel awful about throwing your food away. But there are actions you can take to reduce the amount of waste that you're doing. No, go back. So things that you can do in order to avoid those awful situations where you have to throw your food away or feel like you do is to meal plan. Like before you go to the grocery store, make sure that you're being mindful of the foods that you're eating and stick to it. I personally can be an impulsive buyer. I know that about myself, and I have to make a list, and I have to stick to it. Even if it means window shopping for different types of cookies, know what you're going to get before you go. Also, don't buy perishable foods in excess, because, they're going to perish. Buy what you need, and then you can go again next week. Stock up on non-perishable foods, because they'll last a long time, as was, we saw in the video. Consider buying from local produce, and, if you go to Farm Patch, I don't know if you guys know where that is, it's off of Texas Avenue. They have a section that is fruit that's about to go bad or vegetables that are about to go bad. And if you know, if you find a recipe and make food that night with that food, because it's cheaper that way, and you know that you're contributing to making sure that that food's not going to get thrown away. It is going to be the uglier fruits that were out, but they're still just as tasty. Don't worry. Also, portion your food appropriately. I know it could be easy to stack it on whenever you go to a buffet, but if they don't let you take your food away, the way that Sabisa can, get upset if you're taking food out of there, make sure that you're asking for a half portion. That's okay. Store your food appropriately. Don't leave chicken out overnight. It's gonna go bad, and if you try to eat it, you're gonna get sick. So whenever you're done, make sure that you put it in the fridge. It's just the little things. And then keep moisture at a minimum. That's what I was talking about with the spinach. There's a lot of water that accumulates at the top of that container, and that makes the spinach go bad a whole lot faster than even the date that's on there. So if you can't avoid that, just wipe it off with a paper towel or something every once in a while, and it'll last a whole lot longer in the fridge. Order what you know you can eat, like I was saying, at a buffet. And then try out composting. It's a little intimidating at first. I'm still intimidated by it. But if we can work through it together, it makes sure that we're avoiding throwing away the core of an apple or the banana peel. And it's, another way to just make more plants and then grow more food and keep the life cycle going. And it also helps avoid methane emissions that are extracted from food waste whenever they're in a landfill environment. So you're not alone in your endeavors. These are things you can do to avoid the issues that arise from food waste. These are your references, and thank you. And get going.